My name is Ken Haney. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is Crystal Taylor. And we are the founders of an organization called Hope for Everyone. And our purpose is to educate and train church leaders, pastors, people who are struggling with mental illness and family members who are caring for them on how to deal with the issues of mental illness that we're finding in our culture today. So when it comes to mental illness, a lot of times people have a difficult time understanding what that is and how that works. Mm-hmm. So several years ago, you were diagnosed with bipolar. Tell me what that was like and how did you deal with that?
That was extremely scary because when I heard the word bipolar, I automatically thought somebody that was completely insane. And I wasn't that. And so I went and actually got the book Bipolar for Dummies and read it and got as much, I tried to get as much information about being bipolar as I could. I got really concerned when I turned to, they put me in an outpatient program and I went to that, and there was a lot of Middle Eastern therapies there that I was really uncomfortable with. So I went to my church, and as precious as they were, they just weren't equipped. They just didn't know. And so a lot of it was getting online and just really trying to figure out what was going to work for me and how was I going to include, if they could include Eastern religion and healing, why couldn't I include my God in my healing? And so I just sought that out wholeheartedly.
So the Bible doesn't talk a lot about mental illness per se. It talks about the emotions that we deal with and struggle with and so forth. So when it comes to dealing with something like this, where did you go in Scripture to get support and strength?
I think just, I can't think of any specific verses right now. I felt like I was placed with this struggle and that didn't set well with me. I didn't appreciate it very much. Mm-hmm. And so reading in Proverbs and reading that God knew the plans that God had set forth for me, and that if I leaned on His understanding and not my understanding of what the situation was, that He was going to direct my path. And so that's what I did. I told God, I was like, if I'm gonna walk through this, then we're going to do it, but it's going to be for Your glory, or I don't want to go through this.
So when we're talking about bipolar, some forms of depression, anxiety, and things of that nature, there's an additional component that comes into play. Mm-hmm. It's not about just you having a bad day or getting down in the dumps or so forth. There's a medical aspect involved in that. Can you explain that?
Well, I think sometimes the church misunderstands. We'll just talk about depression for a second. As just being kind of down in the dumps or gloomy, and we just need to pull ourselves up, by our bootstraps, and we need to move on and carry on. And sometimes it's debilitating. And I think people don't understand that it's physiological. It's no different than having, like your insulin not working correctly, and so you're diabetic. This is a chemical in my brain that is not working correctly. I don't have control over that. I can't will that away. I can't fix my hair and do my makeup and walk out the door. I mean, I can fake it. I can fake it like nobody's business, but that doesn't change what's going on, the storm that's going on inside. And so it has to be addressed medically. And so I think there's been a lot of shaming, especially in the church community, over taking medication. I've heard it several times now. That's one of the things that led me to Hope for Everyone is you can't pray this away. You can't not take your medication and get over it. It just isn't, you wouldn't tell somebody who's diabetic, please, stop, just pray about it and quit taking your insulin. No, God gave these people, these scientists, this information to create these medications to counteract what's going on in our bodies. And we would be remiss if we didn't take His mercy and go through with it, I feel like.
And so understanding the medical aspect of it really kind of changes the dynamic. There's still what we call a cognitive aspect where there is taking control of your thoughts, reminding yourself of God's truth and of God's love for you. Mm-hmm. But that only goes so far because you still need to have the medical aspect, the medications and so forth, to kind of get your brain back to the point where it functions normally so that you can tackle these things on the emotional and cognitive.
Well, and I think the depression that I went through that led me to the hospital stay that I went through in 2013 versus the depression I went to like 3 years ago were different, because now in this depression that I went through, now God played a part in that. And now there was a hope of healing. There was an understanding of I'm bipolar and this is cyclical and this is going to move. This is, we're going to take this medication and we're going to move past this. And so that that overwhelming darkness that comes over, that leads you to those really awful thoughts that nobody thinks you should ever have, but are there. They were fightable, because I knew if I just take this medication, if I just walk this walk for the next 6 weeks, that's about how long it takes, I'm going to see a difference, and I'm going to come out of this on the other side, and life is going to be okay again. But I see where people who get into that darkness, that place, it's really terrifying. When you get there, how you can see that there's no way you're ever going to dig yourself out of it, because I think left to our own devices, we don't. So, but you have to take that step of faith in taking your medication, and take that step of faith that God is going to, like any other illness, walk you through this, and that you're not abandoned, I think. So there was two stark differences between the depression that I had that led me to hospitalization, and this depression that I had, I think it was like 3 years ago. Yeah. They were very similar in the pain, but very different in the outcome. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it was because there was a hope there, that medication that God had provided for me was going to step in and do its job.
Do you find people in the church to be open and responsive to that concept, or are they a little
Mostly.
hesitant?
No, well, there's been a couple people, but I don't think that they're representative of the church as a whole. As a whole, the church has been extremely gracious and hungry for knowledge. I have found that the church has been very hungry for knowledge. Explain to me what you're going through. Explain to me how I can help. And they want to. They are so earnestly wanting to reach out and help. And they just don't, they're not equipped to. And so, but I feel like the church as a whole has been amazing.
So part of the purpose of our organization, Hope for Everyone, is to train people in church leadership to understand the dynamics of the situation, and what they can do to be effective in working with people who are struggling with mental illness in this area. And so if you have questions, if there's anything that we can do to help you to train your staff and so forth, please contact us. We'd be glad to be available to serve you in that way.
Mm-hmm.